Yeah, I think exactly you're right on that. Social credit will transfer into food welfare once the shortages come. And if you're naughty, you don't get your food.
Adapt 2030 Mini Ice Age Conversations covers changes in our climate due to a new and intensifying grand solar minimum. In the media, overlooking, downplaying, or burying cold weather changes occurring on our planet. This is in order to keep the global warming agenda steaming full speed ahead. I do this podcast and radio program because we need to begin conversations on how to adapt our food growing strategies long before 2030 as agricultural zones shift, affecting global crop output, but very few mainstream media outlets are talking about the most important issue of our time, cold weather crop losses. Our sun is going through a 400-year cycle, which has effects on our weather patterns as our magnetosphere weakens and the jet streams go out of flow. It's not CO2, it's not you, it's the sun. Are you ready to thrive in the grand solar minimum? Then join me for Mini Ice Age Conversations. I'm your host, David Dubine.
Paul Martin, Dave Hodges, 1360 AM, Johnstown, Colorado. We're so glad you've joined us today. We've got a great guest coming up. His name's David Dubine, and he's the author of Climate Revolution. Hey, Dave, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, and this perception shift and the perception steering that we're getting across every country on the planet right now goes right into the distractions that are going to be never ending as we progress into this grand solar minimum with higher food prices, food riots, inavailability of food, and it just fits. They want to unfurl 5G for possible frequency control on large masses of crowds. So almost everything that we're seeing and witnessing right now fits into this grand solar minimum timeline of needing to control the populace because there won't be enough food for everybody circa 2024. And that's the reason I wrote that book, Climate Revolution.
Well, I've got a copy of it. Your website's oilseedcrops.org. It's a great website. I mean, he's been writing an article a day. You really need to read these so you can get your preps done. What's the timeline on this, Dave? We're at the peak of the solar maximum, sliding into a solar minimum. Am I correct on that?
Right, we're at the regular 11-year solar minimum right now, which is making a lot of news headlines. It's just a regular 11-year event. But you actually hit that on the head. The grand solar maximum, which we haven't seen this much solar activity in, say, the last 3,000 years, that peaked in 1998 and 1999. And now we've been sliding off since that time in terms of solar activity, and we're expected to go into a 400-year low in solar activity, which will affect global crop production. And then here we come into, if you're going to spend double and triple on food, how's that going to pull from the economy? You can see how the unveiling of cryptocurrency going and the use of smart contracts for food deliveries in the future if fiat currencies aren't working correctly, and they don't have the value that they have perceived today. We're going to have to switch mediums of value, and crypto will be it, and smart contracts for food deliveries, because I'll take any of your Bitcoin or Ethereum on a 60,000-ton breakbark ship versus a collapsing fiat somewhere. So everything that you're seeing around you, all the chess pieces are in place for this decline in solar activity. It's a multi-century event.
Yeah, you've got a great article up today. Is it a 100-year temperature cycle? The thing I like about your article, you put the graphics up, and this is showing the heat in Europe right now. His book's Climate Revolution. I've already got my copy of it. It's up on your story today. The censorship going on in different media outlets, including Amazon, make us decide to self-publish this book entitled Climate Revolution, The Grand Solar Minimum. Understand, Prepare, Adapt, and Thrive. This book takes into consideration historical changes in the last 5 grand solar minima going back 2,000 years and even further back to 3,600 years before our present date to look at the climate. Including in this book are discussions on what climate changes are, what events you can expect, how the society and the economy moves, and analysis on how food prices rose or will rise as this whole social fabric of our society starts to wither and rip apart because of all of these changes that we're seeing. I think that pretty much tells you about the book.
sums it up in what we're facing as a society and a species. Now, this whole censorship going on, and if anything that you don't kowtow to the narrative of CO2 warming, they're trying to sideline, and when I say they, I need to define what that is, and it's the persons who are trying to dictate what our society does and how it changes in on itself. Central banks, the money, trying to control the narrative to string everybody along. Now, this is my personal opinion. As far as it can go until the collapse is here with the lack of food availability for you to buy in supermarkets, because you have to think that continuity of governments are preparing around the world now, but they don't want you jumping in on the same supply chain, because if you have 7 billion people wanting to get the same items that they're going to need for survival that you and I need, the governments need the exact same thing. So they're going to put out this perception of stability that, oh, we can explain away global warming. Oh, wait, did it shift to climate change? Oh, no, now it's shifted again to climate extremes. How many more times can they shift the lexicon and narrative? It's all about perception. It's all going to be okay. It's going to be better next year. Don't change your habits of spending. Keep the economy moving with this, consumerism, and we'll just drop off the cliff. And then, hey, thanks for playing because we've already prepared and you didn't. And I think that's kind of the message that we have going on and what we really see in front of us, with a lot of media distraction mixed in on that.
They want to keep the narrative up. I mean, so many people are so dumbed down. They don't pay attention. This would be an excellent book to get them to wake up. You had an article on September the 1st on food prices up and non-availability, and you had a lot of pictures in there of empty shelves and signs saying, whoops, sorry, we're out of this. Don't know when we'll have any back. And a lot of pictures. Wow.
And, following up on that, the Chinese food prices are up 46% this year alone so far. I assure you, and I really say this with all honesty, our food prices are going to be, you're going to fall over at the supermarket when you see how much things are rising in price. You're going to have to bring two relatives with you to pick you up off the floor, because what you could buy last year compared to what you can buy this year is going to be quite different. But then think about how much you're going to pull out of the economy, too, to spend more on doubling food prices, 50% more, tripling food. Where's that money going to come from? And where is it going to pull from? Like, what other industries are going to die on the vine out there as you're spending double and triple on food? It's just a cycle. It's repeatable. There's timelines for it, and we've seen it in the past. You can forecast it out, and here we are again, right at the cusp.
Wow. I think with what you're saying and these pictures on your September 1st article is people need to get their food now. Don't wait. I didn't wait. I've been stocked up for quite a while. But, one of the other things is that gets scary to me if I think about it. You've got 100 million Americans out there that don't have $400 for an emergency.
That's one of the things I talk about as well, is the shift of perception, where you're going to have to stop spending on restaurants and then take that money that you would spend on the restaurant, $50, $100 if you're going to go out, whatever. Go take that and start buying bulk foods with it. Get bulk beans, get the oxygen packs, get the Mylar bags, get the vacuum sealer, get the heat sealer as well. Why don't you be able to make and prepare some of these things yourself for long-term food storage? Buy what's out there, too, so you can see how it's packed properly, see how the professionals do it, and then try to replicate that. Seeds as well. Going to need seeds. I mean, that's going to be worth its weight in gold, seeds. And just going back in history here, just last year, it's a long-term food storage where government went in and bought everything cash that was in a warehouse sitting in the United States, anything that was packed long-term food storage. And now this article you're referencing in my website, now it's all about lack of canned goods. Peas, which have the most protein of any source of vegetable out there, canned peas, and everything that's canned fruit, canned vegetables, carrots, peas. These are the kind of things that are disappearing off the shelves. And you think with Walmart and other larger vendors like this, they're vertical. They own the farms that supply them. So how can they run out of something? If you own the farm that's supplying you, how do you run out of it? Unless it's not being grown because the weather's changing too fast, cold, where the plants are failing, and they're just not able to get the yields out that they used to. And that's the only thing I can come to the conclusion now is the farms are failing. The yields are not coming out. And when the early frosts start this year, mark my words, early frosts are coming. When these early frosts come and the super late planting we had with the corn and the soybeans, USDA is going to have to come clean at some point here about what the true losses are in America. And at that point, you're going to see the futures market jump we're going to look $5, $6, $7 corn here. It's going to go up.
Wow. Yeah, you got a picture here of Walmart in Central Ohio is also running out of flour, bread, other wheat-based products, instant noodles, different kinds of boxed items, instant potatoes, pastas are all dwindling. I look at those shelves going, wow. Well, I've seen comments on some articles around the web, for the last few months about people talking about this very subject. Shelves aren't really. There's a bunch of shelves at the local Walmart don't have anything on them. So as we skydivers say, if you snooze, you lose. Can you imagine your children starving? Back to what I was talking about, what that scares me, you've got 100 million Americans that don't have $400 for an emergency. $400. What are you going to think they're going to do when those food shortages hit? For those of you people that are prepping, for those of you people that are going to prep right now after hearing this information, when you do that, you don't tell anybody. You might tell your mom or your dad, but, and your kids will know. But if you're going to stockpile food, don't tell a soul.
And I would agree with that. This makes sense because what you just alluded to, if people don't have $400, they're going to come and take whatever they can take.
Exactly.
And you think we're going to live in a kumbaya world, we're going to help each other grow food? I talk about that in the book. If you're a community and you're ready, yes. But when it hits and just someday volcanic eruption, New Madrid fault zone goes off, Cascadia range goes off, big quake, tsunami, whatever, you're on your own. Nobody's coming for weeks, if not months. And if it's that drastic, like a New Madrid fault zone quake, as John Casey talks about in his book, Upheaval, it's going to be years before you get help. And if you think people are going to come and just share everything, I'm sorry, you're living in a delusional world. A few people sent me the same article here. Veg Ready, which is a plant-based meal subscription service, has run out of their sellable inventory. So anybody out there with a subscription to get those meals delivered to their home by the month, they're out of food, which makes another tick the box. Why is this major million-dollar company not able to secure enough vegetables to continue with their plant-based meal subscription program? What's going on there? We're seeing this everywhere, from large retailers to small retailers. What's happening with our food supply?
All those rains and flooded fields, there was millions and millions and millions of acres that weren't even planted.
I have 31.6 million acres that are not going to be harvested this year at all. They either took the prevent plant or they did some silage on that to get something and then still try to get some insurance payout.
David, is there any estimates on the impact of that 31.6 million acres on food availability and food pricing?
Well, we can take a look at what the U.S. government's currently doing, trying to rein in the ethanol production, and then it's just really quirky that China would absolutely stop all imports of American agricultural products right now when we have the lowest planting in the last 100 years. It's almost like we're scratching each other's backs to continue this illusion of stability, because if China were to continue to buy at the rate they did, we would already be out. It would be such a shock to the system of how we could not supply China. See, and I just don't get it, how all these things are happening in symbiosis. And is it a coincidence that all this is happening? Reining in ethanol, China stops buying. Suddenly, magically, 1.5 billion bushels of carryover stock suddenly are added to. Wait a second, how is that possible with all the flood damage when so much was washed away and the USDA put a billion bushel decline, yet right now they just added another 1.5 billion bushels into the total? What is this whole thing about creating stability in markets? Surreal smoke and mirrors at this point, in my opinion.
Boy, that's going to come back to haunt them. You had an FYI at the bottom of one of your articles. There's not enough police or army to control 30 to 40 million people in the United States. They will have to use 5G as a crowd control device to control all the unruly protesters due to food riots that will be coming to a city near you.
Well, thank you, but take a look at the rollout and the timeline as well. For the timeline to get 5G unveiled across the United States, whether you like it or not, whether they do medical studies or not, they're jamming it down your throat, and that timeline has to be 2023. And it's just quirky that we put, and the people who research along with myself, if you want to look for others like Ice Age Farmer, Christian over there, John Casey, there's an enormous amount of people telling you the exact same thing with the exact same timeline. 2024, and our society has ripped to shreds. There won't be enough food. But the Great Awakening will happen in 2021. Most people will know what I'm talking about in 2021, and then, this is the important thing, How will they shift? Once they're aware, how will they shift? And this is where, if you take a look at the EU as well, I'm going to jump over to Europe for a second. The Unified Defense Force for the EU and the new integrated highway system also need to be completed by 2023. So what about the unveiling of 5G across Europe and the United States? Same timeline. New integrated defense force and the rapid response highway system, much like our own interstate highway system to get troops to another place real fast. 2023. What is it with all these timelines falling right on top of the grand solar minimum timeline of food unavailability of crop growing?
Well, because they're all totally aware of this. They're not telling the American people or the European people, and so they're just preposition, and then launch.
How are they going to control everybody? Is it a social credit score, much like China? With the Sesame Credit, they try to make a pretty cute name with it, but it's a social credit score. You obey, you kowtow 100%, or you get your score knocked down. Is that going to be who gets food, whoever has the highest score?
Yeah, I think exactly you're right on that. Social credit will transfer into food welfare once the shortages come. And if you're naughty, you don't get your food.
And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. 1360 KHNC, Johnstown, Colorado, the Roar of the Lion. I'm Paul Martin here with Dave Hodges. We're here with our new friend David Dubai of oilseedcrops.org. In that piece you had said, on a serious note, Winnipeg Harvest and other food banks feeding the homeless community are asking for your help because they're running out of food too. They are in dire need of canned stew, canned beans, fish, peanut butter, carbohydrates like pasta, rice, potatoes, mac and cheese. Those are the same things that are unavailable, as I discussed in this article so far. Do you think this is a coincidence? Anyway, the trickle-down effect is going right to the bottom segment of the population. As I have said since the beginning of this channel, it is going to take about 10 to 15% of people at the lower strata of economic earnings in any country to go to the streets to disrupt the entire country economically. When this happens, the police state will go into action because governments will have to control these people. And that's going to be ugly over here, David.
It will be. And just for reference, the channel is Adapt 2030 on YouTube. And I do the video first on Adapt 2030 because we have to adapt all of our food growing strategies by the year 2030, actually far before that. But once I do the video, then I have a friend who helps me take that and turn it into a written content because we have the transcription through YouTube and have all the images that I used, and then we turn it into a PDF. And then I load it onto the blockchain, too, because I want it kept there, unaltered, because you see how much manipulation there is in temperature data today. So when you go back 10, 20, 50, 100 years from now, I want my data set in stone so you can't alter it. So I do take the time. I take the time to put it up on the net as many places as I can because there's so little time left for us. So, yeah, what if I work really hard for 2 or 3 more years? Yeah, it's kind of, that's it. And then hopefully people will have gotten the message by that point. Talking about the crop harvest here, look up in Canada. They're saying that the durum wheat's down, the total wheat harvest is down, the beans are down, the corn is down. So Canada and the U.S., there's not a magic fence there that stops crop losses in Canada. They're definitely going to see major losses here. So it's not just the United States that's experiencing loss. Canada also, gargantuan losses. Pigeons are coming home to roost here at the end of the year, I do believe, because I don't know how much longer they can really keep the fake numbers up there, because something's going to have to go into the silos or not go into the silos. And I really hope the tonnage that's harvested this year will be accounted for truly, because the USDA is doing everybody a disservice by bankrupting all the small farms out there. Those 2 reports that they put out, I think they bankrupt about 18,000 small farms across America. That's sickening in itself. There should be some accountability from the CFTC to see where the insider trading was, because every single report, there's 300,000-400,000 contracts going the opposite direction of where everybody, including the farmers, thought it would go in terms of pricing or declines in forecast production levels or what the yields would be. Yet how are these hundreds of thousands of contracts going 100% against the market, and then whoosh, they're in the money suddenly? Isn't that coincidental too? So where's the CFTC investigating the insider trading in a USDA? Thanks to high heaven, everything that's going on. It's just part of the narrative. It's part of the news feed and all this distraction that's out there. And I'll stop because I could go on for an hour rattling. I'm just so irked by what they did to our small farms.
You're making some excellent points. When we look at the motivations behind it, have you looked at it? Do you really think it's planned food shortages, and have you gone far enough to speculate as to what's behind it?
It's not just myself speculating. It's dozens of others out there that the perception of stability in the food supply is what keeps our society together. Because globally, there's about 8 countries that can supply the rest of the world. If you look around the world, there's 8 to 9 major countries that have enough of what they grow internally that then they can supply the rest of the world externally. If you look around the world, most countries import food. So you have to think about the stability of the financial system as well and keeping the charade going so everybody in a continuity of government can keep preparing as long as they can. Because if most people in the world understood that there won't be enough next year and their food prices are going to double and triple, would they start buying extra now? Because I sure would. You've seen people fighting for a television, knocking each other on the floor, busting out each other's teeth, sending people to the hospital to save 10% on a TV at Black Friday. What do you think they're going to do if their prices rise 50 or 100% for food, something you need every day to stay alive? I don't need a trinket piece of junk from another country to stay alive, but I need food. We've already seen what happens on the sales Black Friday. Now turn it into food and see what happens.
Do you think that Trump knew that this was going to happen when he put the tariffs out and he thought China might strike back on the American farmer?
Again, I do believe that everybody's scratching everybody else's back. It's not a particular if, them, or those people, but it seems that there's a colluded effort globally to keep this perception going, and wherever there seems to be a lack or scarcity, there seems to be a news item that just conveniently or coincidentally picks up for that lack thereof or explanation of it disappearing or that happening. Isn't it also coincidental these days how that works so in sync on the news feed?
Well, they're really good at what they do. They've been doing it a long time. I mean, this is a subject that the powers that be, these demonic creatures that run our world and our country, I mean, there's no way they can let this out of the bag. And that's why it's important for the people to get a copy of this book and get something for their relatives and bring some neighbors over and sit down at a table and go over this information because the time is running short.
Could I throw a strange thought out?
Absolutely.
Well, if you think about these lower realm energies that are feeding off of fear and hate that you're talking about, the demon realms that feed off of this type of energy, and all these things that we see go on that are such dark, filthy energies, they truly are control of the planet. They would not want people warned. They would want everybody to run into this event at 1,000 miles an hour into a brick wall with no airbag. Because can you imagine the amount of devastation in our psyche and how much violence and animosity and the most devious acts are going to go on during this time, from cannibalism and everything in between? Can you imagine if you're at the feeding trough, if you're this type of demon feeding on that energy? This would be the biggest feeding fest in thousands of years here, about to occur right now.